Welcome to Murder Lullaby, where the night is quiet and stories whisper between shadow and memory. If true crime helps you drift into thought, into sleep, or simply into stillness, you're in the right place. Tonight's story is one that lingers, unsettling, human, and hauntingly beautiful in its mystery. Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable. Dim the lights, let the sound carry you. And if you find yourself drawn into this midnight world, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. It helps the story find others who listen the way you do. Now let's begin. Picture a street in Boulder, Colorado. The kind of street where snow falls soft and silent in December, where Christmas lights twinkle from perfect rooflines, where families build lives inside houses that feel safe, solid, permanent. This is University Hill. This is where successful people raise successful children. This is where nothing bad is supposed to happen. On 15th Street, there stands a house, red brick, Tudor Revival style, 15 rooms spread across nearly 7,000 square feet. From the outside, it looks like something from a holiday card. The kind of home that promises warmth, security, the American dream wrapped in mortgage payments and manicured lawns. Inside this house, on Christmas night 1996, a family of 4 went to sleep. By morning, only 3 would wake up, and the house itself would never quite sleep again. Close your eyes for a moment. Breathe in the cold December air of Boulder. Feel the particular stillness that comes after Christmas Day, when the wrapping paper has been cleared away and the excitement has settled into contentment. The Ramsey house sits quiet under stars that shine sharp and clear in the mountain air. The temperature hovers just above freezing. Perfect sleeping weather, some would say. The kind of cold that makes warm beds feel like sanctuary. But before we enter that house, before we step through that door into a story that has haunted America for nearly 3 decades, let's understand who lived there. Let's know them as they were on December 25th, 1996, in the last hours when their world still made sense. JonBenét Ramsey was 53 years old, a successful businessman who had built his computer company, Access Graphics, into a billion-dollar enterprise. He had the kind of face you'd trust with your investments. Calm eyes, a measured way of speaking. He'd survived tragedy before. His eldest daughter, Elizabeth, had died in a car accident 4 years earlier. But he'd rebuilt, remarried, created a new family. Success seemed to follow him like a faithful shadow. Patricia Ann Ramsey, everyone called her Patsy, was 40 years old. A former beauty queen from West Virginia, who had once worn the crown of Miss West Virginia. She had the kind of energy that filled rooms, planned elaborate parties, volunteered for every committee. She dressed her daughter like a princess because she understood what it meant to be one. She knew about spotlights and stages, about the weight of tiaras and the pressure of perfection. Burke Ramsey was 9, almost 10, a quiet boy who liked Nintendo and model airplanes, the kind of child who could disappear into his own world for hours. He had his father's analytical mind, his mother's fine features. In family photos, he often stood a little apart, as if already learning that safety sometimes means distance. And then there was JonBenét. 6 years old, blonde hair that caught light like spun gold, eyes that seemed to know things about performing that most children never learn. She could work a stage like someone 3 times her age. In her pageant videos, she moves with a confidence that's both captivating and somehow unsettling. Too much poise for such small shoulders, too much awareness in those bright eyes. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey, named for her father, a feminized version of John Bennett. She carried his name, but her mother's dreams. She was the star Patsy polished until she shone, the baby of the family, the princess of the house, the one whose light drew every eye. On Christmas Day, 1996, the Ramseys attended a party at the home of family friends, Fleet and Priscilla White. It was the kind of gathering you'd expect in Boulder's affluent circles. Children playing while adults sipped wine and discussed ski trips and stock portfolios. JonBenét wore a red turtleneck and black velvet pants. She'd gotten a new bicycle that morning, pink with training wheels. Burke had his Nintendo games, The family was scheduled to fly to Michigan the next morning, their private plane waiting to take them to their second home. How many Christmas nights have you spent like this? Full of food and family, exhausted from celebration, ready for sleep? There's something universally vulnerable about that particular tiredness. The way we stumble to bed after a day of too much everything. Too much food, too much family, too much forced cheer. We're never more defenseless than when we're sleeping off Christmas dinner. The Ramseys arrived home around 9:30 that evening. Some accounts say JonBenét fell asleep in the car. Her father carried her inside, up the spiral staircase to her second-floor bedroom. Or maybe she walked. The stories vary, as stories often do when memory meets trauma. What we know is that by 10 o'clock, the house on 15th Street had settled into silence. Patsy would later say she helped JonBenét get ready for bed. Changed her into a white shirt with a silver star. Long underwear because of the cold. She was still wearing the silver bracelet she'd gotten for Christmas, the one that said, JonBenét 12 to 25, 96. A date that would soon mean something entirely different than anyone intended. Burke went to bed in his room on the second floor. John checked doors, turned off lights, did the things fathers do to secure their castles for the night. Patsy took a melatonin. She'd been battling ovarian cancer and recovery had left her exhausted. She needed help finding sleep. By most accounts, the family was in bed by 10:30. The house grew quiet. Outside, Boulder continued its quiet existence. A liberal college town where people left doors unlocked and children played freely in yards. The murder rate was essentially zero. Bad things happened elsewhere to other people in different zip codes. But let's pause here in this moment of perceived safety, because this is where our story truly begins. Not with violence, but with trust. The trust we place in locked doors and alarm systems, the trust we have that morning will come as it always does. The trust that our children are safe in their beds. How many of us check on our children before we sleep? That ancient parental ritual of cracking open the door, letting hallway light fall across small faces, listening for the rhythm of peaceful breathing. Did someone check on JonBenét that night? Did they pause at her doorway, satisfied by the sight of blonde hair spread across a pillow? The house itself becomes a character in this story. Built in 1927, renovated and expanded over decades until its original modest footprint had swelled into something grander, more complex. 7 levels if you counted all the small elevation changes. A basement that ran the full length of the house. Multiple staircases. Rooms that connected in unexpected ways. The kind of house where you could move from space to space without being heard. Where sounds carried strangely. Where privacy and isolation existed in equal measure. In the basement, there was a room that had been many things over the years. Storage space, workshop, most recently a wine cellar, though it held no wine that December, just boxes of Christmas decorations waiting to be put away. A broken window that John had smashed months earlier when he'd locked himself out. The window had been repaired, but imperfectly. Cold air still found its way inside. This is the geography of our story. These rooms, these stairs, these windows. Every crime scene is first a living space, a place where ordinary life unfolds until suddenly it doesn't, where morning coffee gets made until one morning it doesn't, where children play until they don't. The hours between 10:30 p.m. and 5:30 a.m. remain largely a mystery. 7 hours of darkness. 7 hours when a house full of people became a crime scene. 7 hours that have been dissected, analyzed, theorized about for nearly 3 decades without ever yielding their secrets. What we know about those hours comes in fragments. Burke would later say he stayed awake for a while playing with his Christmas toys, or maybe he went straight to sleep. His stories would shift like shadows. John said he took a melatonin and read in bed before sleeping. Patsy said the same. Everyone sleeping their private sleep while somewhere in the house, something unthinkable was happening. How do we account for the hours we spend unconscious, those missing thirds of our lives when we're present but absent, home but unreachable? We trust that the world will hold still while we sleep, that we'll wake to find everything as we left it. But sometimes we don't. 5:30 a.m., December 26, 1996. Patsy Ramsey wakes. She would later say she dressed in the same clothes from the night before, a convenience for early morning travel, she explained. The family's flight to Michigan was scheduled for 7. She walked down the spiral staircase from the third-floor master bedroom. And there, on one of the steps, she found 3 pages of paper. The way Patsy told it, she almost stepped over the papers at first. Her mind, still fog-soft from sleep, couldn't quite process what they were. But something made her stop, bend down, pick them up. The writing was in block letters, deliberately crude, as if someone was trying to disguise their handwriting. Mr. Ramsey, it began. And with those 2 words, the Ramsey family's life cleaved into before and after. Let's sit with this moment. A mother, dressed for travel, finding a note where no note should be. The house still dark around her. Her family still sleeping above and below. The ordinary morning routine suddenly derailed by 3 pages that shouldn't exist. She read the first line, then the second, then her mind seemed to fracture. Listen carefully, the note continued. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. The words were bizarre, theatrical, like something from a bad movie, but the message was clear. This was a ransom note. Someone had taken JonBenét. Patsy ran to JonBenét's room. The door was open. The bed was empty. Not just empty, undisturbed, as if JonBenét had never been there at all, or as if someone had smoothed the covers after taking her. The scream that came from Patsy Ramsey at that moment would echo through the house, through the years, through every telling of this story. It was primal, pure terror given voice. The sound a mother makes when she realizes her child is gone. John came running. Burke remarkably seemed to sleep through the chaos, or at least stayed in his room. Patsy was hysterical, waving the papers, unable to form complete sentences. John took the note, tried to read it while Patsy collapsed in panic. We have your daughter in our possession, the note declared. It demanded $118,000 for JonBenét's safe return. Such a specific number, such a strange number. It happened to be almost exactly the amount of John's recent bonus from Access Graphics. Someone knew intimate details about the family's finances. The note went on for 3 pages, filled with movie quotes and strange warnings. Don't try to grow a brain, John. References to law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. Promises that JonBenét was safe and unharmed, but would be beheaded if instructions weren't followed. The writer couldn't seem to decide if they were professionals or amateurs, foreign or domestic, calm or unhinged. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in 100 bills and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Such precise instructions. Someone had thought about this, planned it, imagined how it would unfold. But here's what's strange, what has always been strange. The note was written on paper from a pad found in the Ramsey home, using a pen from the Ramsey home. Someone had sat in that house while the family slept and composed 3 pages of ransom demands. How long would that take? 20 minutes? 30? Longer if you made mistakes, started over, tried different drafts. And indeed, investigators would later find what appeared to be practice notes on the same pad. Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey crossed out, different phrasings attempted and abandoned. Someone had worked on this note like a school assignment, right there in the house. At 5:52 a.m., Patsy called 911. Her voice on the recording is raw panic barely held in check. We have a kidnapping, she tells the dispatcher. Hurry, please. She gives the address, confirms it's her daughter, says there's a ransom note. The dispatcher asks if she's read the note, asks her to read it. Patsy can barely get through it. Her voice breaks on beheaded. Does it say who took her? The dispatcher asks. No, Patsy sobs. It says SBTC Victory, please. SBTC. 4 letters that have never been definitively explained. Hundreds of theories have been proposed. Saved by the Cross, Small Business Technology Council, Subic Bay Training Center, or maybe nothing at all. Maybe just letters that sounded official, important, like something a small foreign faction might use. The call lasted just over 2 minutes. When it ended, when the connection was cut, Patsy and John were left in their house with a ransom note and an empty bedroom. They did what the note explicitly told them not to do. They called the police. They also called friends, Fleet and Priscilla White, John and Barbara Fernie, their pastor. Within minutes, the house would fill with people. The crime scene, if it was a crime scene, would be contaminated beyond repair. But can you blame them? Can you imagine finding your child's bed empty and not immediately calling everyone who might help? The note said not to contact anyone, said JonBenét would die if they did. But what parent could follow such instructions? What parent could sit alone with that terror? The first police officer arrived at 5:59 a.m. Officer Rick French found a house already filling with people. Patsy was inconsolable. John was trying to arrange the ransom money. Friends were arriving, bringing food, offering comfort, adding footprints and fingerprints to what should have been a sealed scene. Officer French did a quick search of the house. He looked for points of entry and exit. He checked doors and windows. Everything seemed secure except for some possible disturbance at a basement window. He went to the basement, saw the broken window John had mentioned. There was a suitcase positioned beneath it, as if someone had used it as a step. French came to a door in the basement, a wooden door with a latch at the top. He turned the handle, but the door seemed stuck. He didn't force it. Later, he would say he felt uncomfortable, that something about that door gave him pause. He moved on. Behind that door was the wine cellar. Let that sink in for a moment. The first officer on scene stood at that door. His hand was on the handle. If he had pushed a little harder, pulled a little differently, this story might have unfolded very differently, but he didn't. He moved on. The door stayed closed. By 7 a.m., the house was full of people. Friends comforting the family, police officers taking notes, FBI agents beginning to arrive. The ransom note said the kidnappers would call between 8 and 10 a.m. with delivery instructions. Everyone waited. 8 o'clock came, no call. 9 o'clock, silence. 10 o'clock, nothing. The deadline passed like a held breath finally released. What did it mean? Had something gone wrong? Were the kidnappers watching, angry that police had been called? Or had there never been any kidnappers at all? Detective Linda Arndt arrived at 8:10 a.m. She was the first detective on scene, and she would be the only detective there for crucial hours. She observed a house in chaos, friends wandering freely, John Ramsey disappearing for long periods, Patsy alternating between hysteria and strange calm, Burke still upstairs, reportedly still asleep, though it was now past 10 in the morning. How does a 9-year-old boy sleep through police arriving, friends gathering, his mother screaming? How does he not come downstairs to see what's happening? Unless someone told him to stay in his room? Unless someone was protecting him from the chaos? Or unless he already knew something that made him want to stay away? Arndt tried to maintain some control over the scene, but she was one person in a house full of people who weren't listening to her. John would disappear for 40 minutes, an hour. When asked where he'd been, he'd say he was checking the mail, making phone calls. Patsy sat surrounded by friends, tissues clutched in her hands, mascara running down her face in perfect black streams. The morning stretched into afternoon. No call came. The house grew quieter as the reality settled in. This wasn't going according to the ransom note script. Something had gone wrong, or the script had never been real. At 1 p.m., Detective Arndt made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She suggested that John and Fleet White search the house again, top to bottom, to see if anything seemed out of place. She would later say she wanted to give John something to do, to keep him busy. She couldn't have known she was sending him to find his daughter. John and Fleet started in the basement. They checked the broken window again. They looked in the boiler room, the storage areas. Then John went to that wooden door with the latch at the top. The door Officer French hadn't forced open. This time John opened it. The room beyond was small, windowless, dark, a concrete chamber that smelled of must and mildew. John reached for the light switch, and in the harsh fluorescent glare, he saw her. JonBenét was on the floor near the far wall. A white blanket covered her torso. Her arms were above her head. There was duct tape over her mouth, a cord around her neck. Her eyes were closed. She wasn't moving. John Ramsey's scream brought everyone running, but he didn't wait. He ripped the duct tape from JonBenét's mouth. He tried to untie the cord around her wrists. He picked up his daughter's body, stiff with rigor mortis, and carried her up the stairs. Up from the basement, through the hallway, into the living room where Detective Arndt waited. He laid JonBenét on the floor, on a rug near the Christmas tree that still sparkled with lights. Arndt checked for a pulse she knew she wouldn't find. JonBenét's body was cold. She'd been dead for hours. The crime scene was now utterly destroyed. Any evidence on JonBenét's body, any trace evidence in the wine cellar, any possibility of understanding exactly how she'd been positioned, how long she'd been there, all of it was compromised the moment John picked her up. Love and protocol collided, and love won, as it almost always does. But let's stop here and consider what John Ramsey experienced in that moment. You're searching for your kidnapped daughter. You're hoping against hope that she's somehow still in the house, hiding, scared but safe. You open a door to a dark room, and there she is, but not as you'd prayed to find her. There, but gone. Present, but absent. Your baby, but not. What would you do? Would you preserve the crime scene? Would you think about evidence and investigation? Or would you do what John did? Scoop up your child and try to carry her back to the light, back to the world of the living, even though you know it's too late. Patsy's reaction when she saw JonBenét's body was volcanic. She threw herself on her daughter, wailing, praying, begging God to bring her back. Friends had to physically restrain her. The house filled with the sound of grief so pure it seemed to shake the walls. But in that moment of chaos and anguish, Detective Arndt noticed something that would stay with her. When John brought JonBenét's body upstairs, when their eyes met across that terrible distance, she felt something she couldn't quite name. Fear? Suspicion? She would later say she counted the bullets in her gun, mentally mapped the distance to exits. Something in John Ramsey's eyes made her afraid. Was it the look of a father destroyed by grief, or was it something else? Arndt never could articulate exactly what she saw, only that it changed everything for her. In that moment, the investigation shifted. This was no longer just a kidnapping gone wrong. This was something else, something that had happened inside the house, not outside it. The coroner arrived at 8 p.m. By then, JonBenét's body had been moved multiple times, covered with a blanket, surrounded by contamination. The crime scene photographers had to work around a house full of people who shouldn't have been there. Every protocol had been broken, every procedure compromised. The official cause of death would be listed as asphyxiation by strangulation, associated with craniocerebral trauma. In simpler terms, someone had strangled JonBenét with a garrote made from cord and a broken paintbrush handle. Someone had also struck her on the head with enough force to crack her skull. The blow would have been fatal on its own. The strangulation would have been fatal on its own. Someone had killed her twice. There were other injuries too, small abrasions, evidence that would be debated for decades. Some experts would see signs of sexual assault, others would disagree. The evidence was there, but its meaning remained frustratingly unclear. The garrote itself was peculiar, not just a cord pulled tight, but an elaborate device with a wooden handle for tightening. The kind of thing someone might learn to make in the military, or from books about sailing or rock climbing. Or the kind of thing someone might create who had watched too many movies, who was playing out a fantasy of what murder should look like. The Ramseys were told to leave their house that night. It was a crime scene now, though it had been so compromised that much of what it might have told us was already lost. They went to stay with friends. Burke, who had finally been brought downstairs and whisked away earlier, was told his sister was in heaven. His reaction, according to those present, was minimal. He asked no questions, showed little emotion. Perhaps he was in shock. Perhaps children process grief differently. Perhaps, that night, while JonBenét's body lay in the morgue, while her parents lay sleepless in a stranger's bed, while Burke did whatever 9-year-old boys do when their sister has been murdered, snow began to fall on Boulder. Soft, silent snow that covered footprints, buried evidence, and transformed the Ramsey house into something from a Gothic fairy tale. The princess was dead. The castle was empty. and the snow kept falling. The next morning, December 27th, Boulder woke to a story that would consume it for years. A child beauty queen murdered in her own home. A ransom note that made no sense. Parents who were either victims or suspects, depending on who you asked. The media descended like hungry birds. The house on 15th Street became the most photographed home in America. But before the media circus truly began, before the theories and accusations and decades of speculation, there were just the facts. A dead child, a broken family, a house full of secrets. Let's talk about secrets for a moment. Every family has them, small ones usually. The affair that almost happened, the debt that's hidden, the dream that died. These secrets live in the walls of our homes, in the spaces between what we say and what we mean. They're mostly harmless, these secrets, part of the compromise of living with other people. But sometimes secrets grow. They feed on silence and shame until they become something monstrous, until they demand terrible prices, until they transform homes into crime scenes and families into suspects. What secrets lived in the Ramsey house? We may never know them all, but we know some. We know that Patsy Ramsey was fighting for her life against ovarian cancer. Stage 4. She'd undergone chemotherapy that had ravaged her body, stolen her hair, aged her beyond her years. She'd survived, but survival had changed her. Friends would later say she'd become more intense, more controlling, more desperate to make every moment count. We know that John Ramsey's business was successful but stressful. Access Graphics had just crossed the billion-dollar mark in sales. With success came pressure, competition, enemies. The ransom note's reference to his business, its strange specificity about his bonus, suggested someone with inside knowledge. We know that JonBenét's pageant career was a source of both pride and controversy. 6 years old and already a veteran of the circuit. Crowned Little Miss Colorado, National Tiny Miss Beauty, Colorado State All-Star Kids cover girl. She could sing and dance and pose with a professionalism that unsettled some people. The pageant world was Patsy's domain, a place where she could relive her own glory days through her daughter. And what about Burke, the quiet boy who built model airplanes and played Nintendo, the son overshadowed by his sister's spotlight? The child who would later say in interviews that chilled viewers that he wasn't scared that night because he knew nothing would happen to him. How did he know? What made him so sure? The investigation that followed was a masterclass in everything that can go wrong when a crime scene is mishandled. The Boulder Police Department, unaccustomed to murders, made mistake after mistake. They didn't secure the house. They let friends and family wander freely. They didn't separate the parents for questioning. They allowed John to search the house. They failed to find the body for 7 hours. But perhaps their biggest mistake was underestimating the Ramseys. Within days, John and Patsy had hired separate attorneys. They hired a publicist. They hired their own investigators. They built a wall of professionals between themselves and the police. They gave television interviews, but refused to sit down with detectives. The first formal interview with the Ramseys didn't happen until 4 months after the murder. By then, attorneys had prepped them. Evidence had been shared. Stories had been aligned. Whatever spontaneous truth might have emerged in those first crucial hours was long gone. But even with all their preparation, strange moments leaked through. Patsy, shown a practice ransom note found in the house, claimed she couldn't identify the handwriting, even though handwriting experts said it was likely hers. John asked about the basement window, gave conflicting stories about when it was broken, when it was fixed, who knew about it. And then there was the ransom note itself. 3 pages when most ransom notes are 3 sentences, written in the house while the family slept, using materials from the house. Who does that? Who takes that risk? Who has that much confidence or that much desperation? Handwriting experts analyzed the note with the intensity of scholars studying sacred texts. Most concluded that John Ramsey didn't write it. But Patsy? The results were inconclusive. She couldn't be eliminated. Some experts saw similarities in letter formations. Others saw deliberate attempts to disguise. The note became a Rorschach test where everyone saw what they already believed. The language of the note was analyzed too, hence and particularly and advise, words that suggested education, formality, but also grow a brain and fat cats, phrases that felt forced, performative. Someone was trying to sound like a kidnapper, but their vocabulary kept betraying them. Use that good southern common sense of yours, the note advised at one point. How did the kidnapper know Patsy was from the South? It was such a personal detail, such an intimate observation, the kind of thing you'd know if you knew the family, or if you were the family. As the investigation continued, Boulder split into camps. Those who believed an intruder had entered the house, killed JonBenét, and escaped without leaving clear evidence, and those who believed someone in the family was responsible, and the ransom note was a desperate attempt at misdirection. The intruder theory had its points. There was the basement window, broken and possibly disturbed. There was a suitcase positioned beneath it as if someone had used it to climb in or out. There were a few unidentified fibers and DNA traces that didn't match any family member. There was the complexity of the garrote, which seemed beyond what a panicked parent might construct. But the theory also had problems. How did an intruder navigate the maze-like house in the dark? How did they find JonBenét's room on the second floor? How did they get her to the basement without waking anyone? Why write the ransom note in the house instead of bringing one? Why kill JonBenét if the goal was ransom? Why leave the body if the goal was murder? The family theory was equally complicated. It required believing that one or more of the Ramseys had killed JonBenét, either intentionally or accidentally, and then staged an elaborate cover-up. It required believing that parents could strangle their dead or dying daughter to make it look like murder. It required believing a 9-year-old boy could keep such a secret. But this theory explained some things the intruder theory couldn't. Why the ransom note was so long and personal. Why JonBenét's body was wrapped in her own blanket, a gesture that seemed almost tender. Why there were no clear signs of forced entry. Why the parents behaved so strangely in those first crucial hours. One theory that emerged involved Burke. Perhaps there had been an accident. Perhaps a fight between siblings had gone wrong. Perhaps the head blow had come first in anger or play, and everything else was staging by parents desperate to protect their surviving child. It would explain Burke's strange calm. It would explain the parents' immediate call to lawyers. It would explain why a family that had lost one daughter to a car accident might do anything to avoid losing their son to prison. But Burke was 9. Could a 9-year-old have caused such damage? Could parents really strangle their daughter to protect their son? Could a family maintain such a deception for decades? Another theory focused on Patsy. Perhaps JonBenét had wet the bed again. She'd been having problems with bedwetting. Perhaps Patsy, exhausted from cancer treatment, stressed from the holidays, had snapped. Perhaps a moment of anger had led to tragedy, the head blow, the panic, the elaborate staging to make it look like something else. This theory pointed to fibers from Patsy's jacket found on the duct tape, on the blanket, in the paint tray where the garrote handle originated. It noted that the paintbrush used was from Patsy's art supplies. It observed that the ransom note's handwriting couldn't eliminate her. It suggested that a mother might wrap her daughter's body tenderly even after committing the unthinkable. But Patsy was also a devoted mother by all accounts. Friends described her love for JonBenét as intense, perhaps too intense, but genuine. Could a woman who had fought cancer to stay alive for her children take the life of one of them? Could she maintain the charade while dying of cancer herself, as she would 8 years later? John Ramsey seemed the least likely suspect. He'd been sleeping, according to everyone's timeline. He had no history of violence. His older children from his first marriage described him as a loving, if somewhat distant, father. But he also controlled the narrative from the beginning. He found the body. He contaminated the scene. He hired the lawyers and the publicists. He shaped the story that the world would hear. Was he protecting someone? Was he protecting everyone? Or was he simply a father doing what he thought best in an impossible situation? The grand jury that investigated the case for 13 months thought someone in the family was responsible. In 1999, they voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey for child endangerment and accessory to murder. But the district attorney, Alex Hunter, refused to sign the indictment. He said there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute successfully. The grand jury's decision was sealed, hidden from public view for 14 years. When those documents were finally released in 2013, they revealed that the grand jury believed JonBenét's parents had permitted a child to be unreasonably placed in a situation which posed a threat of injury to the child's life or health, and had rendered assistance to a person who had committed murder. They didn't say who that person was. They didn't say whether it was one of the parents or someone else. They just said the parents had helped cover it up. But by 2013, Patsy Ramsey was dead. She died in 2006, the cancer finally winning its long battle. She went to her grave maintaining her innocence, swearing she didn't know who had killed her daughter. John remarried, moved away from Colorado, continued to protest his innocence and push the intruder theory. Burke grew up, became an engineer like his father, stayed out of public view until 2016 when he gave an interview that only raised more questions. In that interview, Burke smiled at inappropriate moments. He demonstrated how someone might have hit JonBenét with a flashlight. He seemed detached, analytical, as if discussing someone else's tragedy. The interview was meant to clear his name, but only fueled more speculation. The physical evidence in the case remains frustratingly ambiguous. DNA testing has found genetic material that doesn't match any family member. But it's trace DNA, the kind that could come from manufacturing, handling, innocent transfer. It's not the kind of definitive evidence that solves cases. The pineapple found in JonBenét's stomach became one of the case's strangest clues. She'd eaten it shortly before her death, but the parents said she hadn't had any pineapple at the Whites' party or before bed. Yet there was a bowl of pineapple on the Ramsey kitchen table with Burke's fingerprints on it. Had JonBenét gotten up in the night for a snack? Had someone given it to her? Why did this small detail matter so much? Because it spoke to timeline and truth. If JonBenét had eaten pineapple in the house after the family said everyone was asleep, then someone was lying about something. Small lies often point to bigger ones. The flashlight on the kitchen counter became another focal point. It didn't belong there, the Ramseys said. Or maybe it did. Their stories changed. It was similar to the type that might have caused JonBenét's head wound, but there was no physical evidence on it, no blood, no hair, no tissue. Had it been cleaned, or was it just a flashlight with no connection to the crime? Every piece of evidence could be read multiple ways. Every fact had a counterfact. Every theory had a flaw. The case became a mirror where people saw their own beliefs about family, about violence, about the nature of evil itself. Some saw a family destroyed by an intruder and then destroyed again by suspicion. Others saw a family closing ranks around a terrible secret. Some saw incompetent police work. Others saw clever manipulation by wealthy suspects. The truth, if there was a single truth, remained elusive. Let's return to the house for a moment. After the Ramseys moved out, it sat empty for years. Potential buyers were scarce. Who wants to live in a house where a child was murdered? Who wants to wake up every day in rooms where horror once lived? Eventually, someone did buy it, and then sold it, and it was bought and sold again. Each new owner tried to exorcise the ghosts through renovation, repainting, remodeling. They changed the address from 755 to 749 as if different numbers could mean a different history. They stripped the wallpaper, replaced the carpets, filled the wine cellar with actual wine. But houses have memories that survive renovations. Every owner reported feeling something in that basement. A coldness that had nothing to do with temperature, a heaviness in the air. The wine cellar door would sometimes swing open on its own, they said. Probably just the house settling. Probably just imagination. Probably. The spiral staircase where Patsy found the ransom note was rebuilt, made less grand, less theatrical. But people still paused on those steps, still felt something shift in the air. The house knew what it had witnessed. Houses always know. As years passed, the investigation continued in fits and starts. New district attorneys would review the case, announce new theories, pursue new leads that led nowhere. In 2008, DNA evidence was used to officially clear the Ramsey family. The new DA, Mary Lacey, even wrote them a letter of apology, but her successor would criticize that decision, saying the DNA evidence was too weak to eliminate anyone. John Ramsey remarried and tried to build a new life. He wrote books, gave interviews, pushed for new DNA testing. He wanted the case solved, he said, to clear his family's name once and for all. But every interview, every book, every public appearance only seemed to deepen the mystery. His calm demeanor, which some saw as strength, others interpreted as coldness. His insistence on the intruder theory, which some saw as truth-seeking, others saw as deflection. Burke Ramsey stayed silent for 20 years. When he finally spoke in 2016, it was to file lawsuits against media organizations that suggested he was involved. He won settlements from CBS and others. Money changed hands. Silence was agreed upon. The legal system did what it does best. It transformed tragedy into transactions. But truth isn't transactional. It doesn't settle out of court. It lives in the spaces between what we can prove and what we believe. It haunts us like JonBenet's pageant videos, where she sings about wanting to be a cowboy's sweetheart, her voice high and sweet and forever 6 years old. Those videos became part of American culture's dark fascination. A beautiful child performing for judges, wearing makeup and elaborate costumes frozen in time before tragedy struck. People watched them obsessively, looking for clues, for signs, for something that would explain what happened. But all they showed was a little girl who liked to perform, who knew how to find the light and stand in it. The pageant world itself came under scrutiny. Was it exploitation? Was it sexualization? Did it attract dangerous attention? Or was it just mothers and daughters playing dress-up on a grand scale, no different from dance recitals or piano competitions? The debate raged, but it didn't solve the murder. It just added another layer of judgment to an already complex story. Patsy's death in 2006 meant that many questions would never be answered. She took her secrets, if she had secrets, to the grave. Her funeral was private, small, far from the media circus that had defined her last decade. She was buried in Georgia, next to JonBenét. Mother and daughter reunited in death, leaving the living to wonder what they knew, what they did, what they suffered. In her final years, Patsy had found religion more deeply than ever before. She spoke of forgiveness, of seeing JonBenét again in heaven, of God's plan being beyond human understanding. Some saw this as the comfort of a grieving mother. Others wondered if it was the guilt of someone seeking absolution. John continued his campaign to find what he called the real killer. He funded new investigations, pushed for advanced DNA testing, appeared on television to plead for information. He aged into a silver-haired patriarch of grief, forever associated with that December morning, forever defending his family's innocence. But innocence is a complex concept when tragedy strikes. Even if the Ramseys didn't kill JonBenét, were they innocent? They had brought her into the pageant world. They had failed to protect her. They had lived in a house where somehow someone was able to kill their daughter. Does innocence require only the absence of guilt, or does it demand something more? The Boulder police, criticized for decades over their handling of the case, have never officially closed it. Detectives still get assigned to review evidence, follow up on tips that still come in regularly. People claim to know who did it, claim to have evidence, claim to have heard confessions, but nothing ever leads anywhere definitive. In 2006, a man named John Mark Carr confessed to killing JonBenét. He knew details about the case. He was obsessed with her. He'd been in the area at the time. For a brief moment, it seemed like the mystery might be solved. But his DNA didn't match. His story didn't hold up. He was just another disturbed individual drawn to a famous tragedy, wanting to insert himself into the narrative. There have been other false confessions over the years. Other suspects who seemed promising until they didn't. A local journalist, a neighborhood Santa Claus, a handyman who had worked for the family. Each theory had its believers, its evidence, its fatal flaws. The case became an industry unto itself. Books, documentaries, TV specials, podcasts, each one promising new revelations, new theories, new evidence. But they all ended the same way, with questions, not answers, with possibilities, not certainties. Some investigators believe the key was in the ransom note's peculiar phrases. "We are a foreign faction." Who says that? "She dies." Why the sudden shift from we to I in the pronouns? "Victory." SBTC. What kind of victory? Victory over what? Linguistic analysts studied the note like a sacred text. They found it contained language patterns consistent with someone trying to sound like someone else. The writer was educated, but trying to seem less so. Female, some experts said, based on certain word choices and emotional appeals. But others disagreed. The note remained a puzzle that could be assembled multiple ways, each creating a different picture. The amount demanded, $118,000, continued to baffle. It was such a small amount for a wealthy family, such a specific amount. John's bonus had been $118,117.50. Someone had rounded down. Someone who knew exactly what John had earned, someone with access to very private information. But if the Ramseys staged the kidnapping, why ask for such a specific amount that would point directly to them? Why not ask for millions? Why not make it more believable? Unless the specificity was meant to point away from them, to suggest an insider who wasn't family. Circles within circles, each theory eating its own tail. The time of death became crucial and controversial. The coroner estimated JonBenét had died between 10 p.m. on the 25th and 6 a.m. on the 26th. But rigor mortis suggested she'd been dead for several hours when found at 1 p.m. If she died closer to 10 p.m., it meant she was killed almost immediately after the family got home. If she died closer to 6 a.m., it meant someone was in the house all night with her. Both scenarios were horrifying in different ways. An immediate murder suggested explosive violence, a sudden loss of control. A delayed murder suggested prolonged suffering, deliberate planning. Neither fit neatly with either the intruder or family theories. The garrote continued to perplex experts. It wasn't just a rope pulled tight. It was a device, constructed with care. The rope was tied to a broken paintbrush handle, creating a tool for tightening. Some saw this as evidence of a sexual sadist, someone who killed for pleasure. Others saw it as staging, someone trying to make a death look like something it wasn't. But who stages a murder to look like a different murder? Who has the presence of mind, in the aftermath of killing or finding their child dead, to construct such an elaborate prop? And if it was staging, why make it so complicated? Why not just use a rope? Unless the garrote came first. Unless it was part of something else. A game gone wrong, an accident that led to panic. Children play dangerous games sometimes. They don't understand how fragile bodies are, how quickly play can turn to tragedy. But this theory required believing either Burke or JonBenét herself was playing with ropes in the basement on Christmas night. It required a lot of imagination and very little evidence. The head wound added another layer of complexity. The skull fracture was massive, 8.5 inches long. It would have been fatal on its own. But there was surprisingly little bleeding, which suggested it might have happened after the strangulation, when the heart had already stopped. But that made no sense. Why hit someone who was already dead? Unless there were two different events. Unless the head blow came first, causing unconsciousness but not immediate death. Unless someone then strangled JonBenét, either to end her suffering or to make sure she couldn't tell what had happened. This scenario required someone with extraordinary coldness or extraordinary panic. Maybe both. The evidence of prior sexual abuse remained hotly debated. Some experts saw signs of chronic abuse in the autopsy findings. Others said the evidence was inconclusive or could be explained by other factors. If there had been abuse, it opened up new possibilities for motive. Someone with a secret to protect. Someone whose carefully constructed life would collapse if JonBenét told. But JonBenét's pediatrician, who had seen her 33 times in 6 years, said he'd never seen signs of abuse. Teachers, friends' parents, pageant organizers, no one reported concerns. Either there was no abuse or it was hidden with exceptional skill. The grand jury's sealed indictments suggested they believed the parents were guilty of creating a dangerous situation and then covering up for whoever killed JonBenét. This could mean they believed one parent killed her and the other helped cover it up. Or it could mean they believed someone else, Burke, an intruder they knew, was responsible, and both parents participated in the cover-up. The dangerous situation language was particularly intriguing. What situation? The pageants that might have attracted a predator, the broken window that provided access, the failure to set the alarm that night, or something else, something about the family dynamics that made tragedy inevitable. We think of murder as a singular act, a moment when someone decides to kill. But sometimes murder is the culmination of 1,000 smaller violences. The harsh word that becomes a habit, the punishment that gets a little more severe each time, the game that gets a little more dangerous, the secret that demands a higher price to keep. Was JonBenét's death that kind of murder? The final act in an escalating pattern that no one saw or stopped? Or was it truly a bolt from the blue, a random act that shattered an ordinary family? The house itself offers no answers. It stands today much as it stood then, despite all the renovations. The basement is still a basement. The wine cellar is still a small, dark room. The stairs still climb to bedrooms where children once slept. But it's a house holding its breath, waiting for something that will never come. The sound of a 6-year-old's laughter, the patter of small feet, the return of innocence. In 2016, 20 years after the murder, CBS aired a documentary that used modern forensic techniques to re-examine the evidence. They concluded Burke had accidentally killed JonBenét, and the parents had covered it up. Burke sued for $750 million. The case settled for an undisclosed amount. That same year, new DNA testing was performed using more advanced techniques. The results were inconclusive. The trace DNA could have come from anywhere, anyone. It wasn't enough to identify a killer or eliminate a suspect. Science had advanced, but not enough to penetrate the mystery. Jon Ramsey, now in his 80s, still gives occasional interviews. He's remarried again, living quietly, but the case follows him like a shadow. He speaks of JonBenét in present tense sometimes, as if she's still 6, still singing, still alive in some parallel universe where that December night unfolded differently. Burke remains silent except through his lawyers. He's never married, lives alone, works in technology like his father. Those who know him describe him as brilliant but odd, someone who struggles with normal human connection. Whether that's because of what happened to his sister or what happened after, the suspicion, the scrutiny, the weight of unsolved tragedy, no one can say. The investigators who worked the case carry it with them too. Detective Linda Arndt left the police force, traumatized by what she'd seen and how the case was handled. Steve Thomas, another detective, wrote a book arguing Patsy was responsible, then was sued and settled out of court. Lou Smith, who championed the intruder theory, worked the case until his death in 2010, convinced the family was innocent. Each investigator saw the same evidence, but reached different conclusions. It's a reminder that we see what we're prepared to see, what our experience and instincts tell us to see. Evidence doesn't speak for itself, it speaks through us, filtered by our beliefs about human nature, about what people are capable of, about what evil looks like. The pageant footage of JonBenét continues to circulate online, viewed millions of times by people who weren't even born when she died. She's forever frozen at 6, forever performing, forever about to go home to a house where something terrible waits. We watch her knowing what she doesn't know, that she has days, perhaps hours left to live. It creates a unique form of grief, mourning for someone we never knew but feel we do. The costumes she wore, the cowgirl outfit, the Las Vegas showgirl ensemble, the patriotic sailor suit, are stored somewhere as evidence. Tiny garments that once transformed a little girl into whatever she wanted to be. Now they're artifacts of a life cut short, reminders that she was real, not just a mystery to be solved. Her bedroom in the Ramsey house has been photographed thousands of times. The canopy bed, the stuffed animals, the trophies from pageants. It looks like any privileged child's room, except for the history it holds. The last place she slept safely. The place her parents expected to find her on the morning of December 26th. The ransom note remains the case's most puzzling artifact. 3 pages of evidence that evidence experts can't definitively interpret. It's been enhanced, digitized, analyzed with every technique available. Yet it keeps its secrets. The hand that wrote it remains unknown. The mind that composed it remains a mystery. "Listen carefully," it began, like someone trying to get attention, to be taken seriously. But listen to what? The note is full of noise, but empty of meaning. It's a performance of a ransom note, rather than an actual ransom note. Someone was playing a part, but we still don't know who or why. The practice notes found on the same pad suggest the writer needed multiple attempts to get it right. But right for what purpose? If you're a kidnapper, you write the note before entering the house. If you're staging a kidnapping after an accidental death, why make it so elaborate? Why not keep it simple? Unless the elaboration was the point. Unless someone needed 3 pages to convince themselves as much as anyone else. Unless the note was a form of self-talk, a way of creating a narrative that made sense of something senseless. "You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult," the note warned. Such a strange threat. Who calls someone a fat cat in 1996? It sounds like something from an old movie, which might be exactly where it came from. Several phrases in the note appear in films. "Don't try to grow a brain," echoes Dirty Harry. "If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies." Sounds like something from a thriller. Was the writer a movie buff? Or just someone who, in a moment of extreme stress, reached for language they'd heard before, phrases that sounded like what a kidnapper might say? We all do this in crisis. Fall back on scripts we've absorbed, play roles we've seen performed. The note ended with "Victory, SBTC," a triumphant conclusion to a threatening message. But victory over what? And why sign it at all? Real ransom notes are typically brief and anonymous. This one was long and had a signature of sorts, even if it was meaningless. Or was it meaningless? Hundreds of theories have been proposed for SBTC. Some link it to the Bible, Patsy's faith, some to John's military service, some to Burke's scouting activities. Others suggest it meant nothing, just random letters meant to sound official. Like everything else in this case, it can be read multiple ways, each as plausible as the last. The broken window in the basement became crucial to the intruder theory. John said he'd broken it months earlier when locked out of the house, but he also gave conflicting accounts of when it was fixed, if it was fixed. The window well showed some disturbance, but not the clear signs you'd expect if someone had climbed through on a winter night. A suitcase was positioned below the window, supposedly used as a step, but the suitcase contained a pillow sham and duvet that matched JonBenét's bedroom. Why would an intruder pack her bedding? Unless they planned to take her body, then change their mind. Unless the suitcase was already there and its position was coincidental. The spider web in the window well became a point of contention. Some said it proved no one had climbed through recently. Others said it could have been rebuilt overnight. Spiders work quickly. A tiny detail that became a battle between experts, between theories, between worldviews. The lack of footprints in the snow outside became significant. It had snowed lightly that night, but photos showed no clear tracks leading to or from the house. The intruder theorists pointed out that the snow was patchy, that someone could have walked on cleared areas. The family theorists saw it as proof no one had entered or left. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. The crime scene was so compromised, so many people had tramped through, that crucial evidence might have been destroyed before anyone knew to look for it. The first hours of an investigation are critical. In this case, those hours were chaos. The 911 call Patsy made has been analyzed extensively. Some hear panic and genuine terror, others hear performance and calculation. At the end of the call, after Patsy apparently hung up, there are sounds that might be voices. Enhanced audio might reveal Burke's voice, even though he was supposedly asleep. Or it might reveal nothing, just noise that pattern-seeking minds turn into meaning. We want murders to make sense. We want clear motives, logical sequences of events, evidence that points in one direction. But real murders are often senseless, chaotic, full of contradictions. People don't behave rationally in extreme situations. They make strange choices, tell partial truths, forget crucial details, remember things that didn't happen. The Ramsey case is unsolvable in part because it offers too many solutions. Every piece of evidence supports multiple theories. Every behavior can be interpreted different ways. Every fact has a counterfact. It's like a puzzle with extra pieces from different puzzles mixed in. You can force them together, create a picture, but it's never quite right. And perhaps that's the most unsettling truth, that sometimes terrible things happen and we never know why or how or who. That houses can hold secrets forever. That families can carry mysteries to their graves. That a 6-year-old girl can die in her own home, and decades later, we still don't know what happened in those dark hours between bedtime and dawn. The Boulder Police Department receives tips about the case every week, even now. People with theories, with dreams they think are visions, with neighbors they suspect. The case has its own gravitational pull, drawing in the lonely, the obsessed, the would-be detectives. It's become less about JonBenét and more about us, about our need for answers, for justice, for the world to make sense. There are online communities dedicated to solving the case. They trade theories, analyze photos, debate evidence with the intensity of scholars discussing ancient texts. Some are Team Ramsey, believers in the family's innocence. Others are Team Guilty, convinced the parents or Burke were involved. They'll never agree because they're not really arguing about evidence. They're arguing about human nature, about what people are capable of, about whether darkness comes from outside or grows within. JonBenét would be 34 now if she'd lived. She might have children of her own. She might have left the pageant world behind or embraced it fully. She might have become a teacher, a doctor, an artist, or nothing remarkable at all. We'll never know who she would have become. She's forever 6, forever in that white shirt with the star, forever in a basement room where no child should be. The house on 15th Street, now 749, sold again recently. The new owners are young, probably weren't even alive when JonBenét died. They might not know the full history of their home, or they might not care. Houses outlive their tragedies, usually. New families move in, paint the walls new colors, create new memories. Life goes on. But some houses never fully shake their histories. They become landmarks of tragedy, permanent reminders of temporary horror. The Ramsey house is one of these. No matter how many times it's sold, renovated, renumbered, it will always be the house where JonBenét died. The house where the ransom note appeared on the stairs. The house that held its secrets through that long December night and holds them still. Late at night, when Boulder sleeps under mountain stars, when snow falls soft on 15th Street, you can almost imagine it all happening again. The family coming home from the party, the children going to bed, the parents settling in for the night. Everything normal until it wasn't. Everything safe until it wasn't. Everything as it should be until it would never be again. This is the nature of tragedy. It transforms ordinary places into crime scenes, ordinary nights into nightmares, ordinary families into suspects or victims or both. It takes what was and replaces it with what is, leaving us to wonder forever about what really happened in those dark spaces between one day and the next. The investigators are mostly retired now. The prosecutors have moved on to other cases. The journalists have written their books, filmed their documentaries, told the story as many ways as it can be told. But the case remains open. Technically, officially, eternally open. Waiting for the clue that never comes, the confession that never arrives, the solution that never quite fits. John Ramsey says he still hopes for resolution before he dies. He's an old man now, carrying this weight for nearly 3 decades. Whether he carries guilt or just grief, only he knows. He's outlived his daughter by more years than she lived. He's outlived his second wife. He's outlived many of his accusers and defenders. But he hasn't outlived the questions. Burke remains an enigma. Those who encounter him describe someone brilliant but strange, successful but solitary. He's built a life as far from the spotlight as possible, but the shadow of that December night follows him everywhere. Is he a victim of tragedy and suspicion, forever marked by something that happened when he was 9? Or is he keeper of secrets that would destroy what's left of his family? We may never know. The pageant world that JonBenét inhabited has largely moved on. Child beauty pageants still exist, but they're more careful now, more conscious of how they appear. JonBenét's death became a cautionary tale about sexualizing children, about the dangers of putting them in spotlights. Whether that's fair or not, whether the pageants had anything to do with her death, her image in those costumes became inseparable from her tragedy. The photos of her, in full makeup, in adult-styled costumes, remain deeply unsettling. Not because they're inappropriate necessarily, but because we know how her story ends. We see a 6-year-old playing dress-up, and we think about violence, about vulnerability, about the terrible things that happen to children. The images have been poisoned by hindsight. But there are other photos too. JonBenét on her bike, smiling a real smile, not a pageant smile. JonBenét with her family at the beach, building sandcastles. JonBenét being a regular kid before she became a symbol, a mystery, a ghost that haunts America's conscience. These photos remind us she was real, she was loved, she was more than just a murder victim. The ransom note remains in evidence, those 3 pages preserved forever. Sometimes I imagine them in their evidence bag, in some vault somewhere, holding their secrets tight. The paper slowly aging, the ink slowly fading, but the mystery as fresh as ever. Someone knows who wrote those words. Someone, somewhere, knows exactly what happened that night. Or maybe they don't. Maybe even the person responsible has convinced themselves of a different version of events. Memory is malleable, especially traumatic memory. We edit our histories, rewrite our roles, transform our guilt into innocence through the alchemy of self-deception. Maybe the truth has been buried so deep that even those who know it can't find it anymore. There's a theory in physics about parallel universes, infinite realities branching off from every decision point. Somewhere, in another timeline, the Ramseys set their alarm that night. Somewhere else, they decided not to go to the Whites' party. Somewhere, JonBenét woke up when someone entered her room, screamed, brought her parents running. Somewhere, she lived to see December 26th and 27th and all the days that followed. But in our timeline, in our universe, she didn't. She died in that house, in that basement, on that night. And we're left with questions that multiply like cancer cells, spreading through decades, infecting everyone who gets too close to the case. Questions about what happened, who did it, why. Questions about justice and truth, and whether we can ever really know either. The wine cellar where JonBenét's body was found has been photographed, mapped, measured, analyzed. It's just a small room, concrete and cold. But it's also the center of a mystery that has consumed millions of hours of investigation, speculation, imagination, such a small space to hold such a large darkness. I think about the moment John Ramsey opened that door, the fraction of a second before his eyes adjusted to the dark, the moment when he still had hope that his daughter was somewhere else, anywhere else, and then the light switch, and then the seeing, and then the knowing, and then the screaming. How does a mind survive that transition from hope to horror? I think about Patsy waking up that morning, finding the note. The way the universe shifted in the time it takes to read 3 pages. How she must have replayed that moment for the rest of her life. Should she have noticed something the night before? Should she have checked on JonBenét? Should she have set the alarm? The crushing weight of hindsight, of all the small choices that led to catastrophe. I think about Burke, 9 years old, waking up to a house full of police and panic, his sister gone, his parents destroyed, his life transformed into something unrecognizable. Whether he knew more than he said or exactly as little as he claimed, that morning marked the end of his childhood. You can't unknow that kind of terror. You can't unfeel that kind of loss. And I think about JonBenét, 6 years old. What were her last thoughts, her last words? Did she know what was happening to her? Did she call for her parents? Did she think it was a game until it wasn't? The not knowing is almost worse than knowing would be. The imagination fills the gaps with possibilities, each more heartbreaking than the last. This is what unsolved murders do to us. They create wounds that never heal because they never close. They leave us suspended between question and answer, forever reaching for truth that stays just beyond our grasp. They make us doubt everything: justice, safety, our ability to know what's real. The Ramsey case has spawned dozens of books, hundreds of articles, thousands of theories. It's been examined from every angle: psychological, forensic, sociological, even spiritual. Some see it as a story about wealth and privilege, how money can buy lawyers and public relations firms, but not innocence. Others see it as a story about media hysteria, how the press can convict in the court of public opinion without evidence or trial. Some see it as a cautionary tale about child beauty pageants, about the sexualization of children, about the dangers of putting them in the public eye. Others see it as a story about family dysfunction, about secrets and lies, about the violence that can hide behind perfect facades. But at its core, it's simpler than all that. It's about a little girl who went to bed on Christmas night and never woke up. It's about a family that was whole and then wasn't. It's about a house that was a home until it became a crime scene. It's about the kind of loss that echoes through decades, touching everyone who hears about it, reminding us how fragile our safety really is. The forensic evidence has been tested and retested with every new technology: touch DNA, genetic genealogy, digital enhancement. Each advance brings hope that this might be the breakthrough, this might solve it. But the evidence is degraded, contaminated, ambiguous. Science has limits, especially when the crime scene was compromised from the start. The grand jury that voted to indict the Ramseys heard evidence we've never seen. They saw testimony that remains sealed. They knew things we don't know, and they believed the parents were involved, at least in covering up what happened. But the district attorney disagreed, refused to prosecute. Was he right? Was he protecting innocent people from a witch hunt? Or was he failing to pursue justice for a murdered child? We'll probably never know. The grand jury members are bound by secrecy rules. The evidence they saw remains locked away. The district attorney is dead now, his reasoning gone with him. Another layer of mystery added to a case that already has too many. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if the case was solved tomorrow. If someone confessed and the confession could be verified. If DNA evidence finally pointed to a definitive answer. Would it bring peace? Or would it just shift the anguish to a different register? The not knowing is terrible, but knowing might be terrible too, especially if the answer is one many people don't want to hear. Because we're invested now, all of us who've followed this case. We have our theories, our beliefs, our certainties. We've chosen sides, Team Intruder or Team Ramsey. We've made this case about more than just JonBenét. We've made it about our own beliefs about human nature, about evil, about what parents are capable of and what they aren't. If it was proven tomorrow that an intruder killed JonBenét, those who've spent decades believing the family was involved would struggle to accept it. If it was proven the family was involved, those who've defended them would feel betrayed. The case has become a Rorschach test, and we've all seen what we needed to see. But JonBenét deserves better than to be a projection screen for our theories. She was a real child with a real life that was really ended. She had favorite foods and toys and songs. She had dreams about what she wanted to be when she grew up. She had a family who, whatever their faults or secrets, loved her in their own complicated way. The Christmas presents she opened that last morning are evidence now. The bicycle she never got to ride properly. The bracelet with her name and that date, 12/25/96, that she wore to her death. Objects that were meant to bring joy became artifacts of tragedy. This is how murder transforms the world, turning innocent things into evidence, happy memories into crime scene photos. The neighborhood where the Ramseys lived has moved on. New families, new stories, new Christmases that come and go without tragedy. But the locals know. They point out the house to visitors. They tell the story to newcomers. They remember that morning when police cars filled the street, when helicopters circled overhead, when their safe enclave became the center of a nightmare. Some of them were interviewed repeatedly. What did you see? What did you hear? Did you notice anything strange? They became bit players in a drama they never auditioned for. Their memories were picked apart, their observations scrutinized. Some reported seeing strange lights, hearing odd sounds. Others saw and heard nothing. Memory is unreliable, especially when filtered through the knowledge of what happened. The White family, who hosted the Christmas party, were investigated thoroughly. Fleet White, who was with John when he found JonBenét's body, became both a witness and a suspect in various theories. The friendship between the families dissolved under the weight of suspicion and scrutiny. This is another casualty of unsolved murders, the relationships that can't survive the aftermath. There were other suspects over the years. A local Santa Claus who had visited the house, a former employee with a grudge, a neighbor with a history of mental illness. Each was investigated, eliminated, or remained in that gray zone of can't be ruled out but can't be proven guilty. The list of potential suspects grew so long it became meaningless. One theory suggested JonBenét was killed by someone who knew the family but wasn't part of it, someone with access to the house, knowledge of the layout, information about John's bonus. This would explain the personal nature of the ransom note, the lack of forced entry, the killer's apparent comfort moving through the house. But who and why? Another theory proposed that JonBenét's death was accidental and everything else was staging, a game that went wrong, a moment of anger that went too far, a medical emergency that was mishandled. This would explain the elaborate cover-up, the theatrical ransom note, the parents' strange behavior. But it requires believing parents could strangle their child to cover up an accident. It requires a level of cold calculation that's hard to fathom. The strangulation itself is puzzling. The garrote was sophisticated enough that some experts believe it shows knowledge of killing techniques. But it was also crude, improvised from materials at hand. The paintbrush handle came from Patsy's art supplies in the basement. The cord was the kind used for various household purposes. Someone built this device in the house either before or after JonBenét was struck on the head. The order of injuries matters enormously. If the head blow came first, it suggests one scenario: sudden violence, possibly accidental, followed by deliberate strangulation. If the strangulation came first, it suggests another: intentional murder with the head blow as part of the attack or staging. Medical experts disagree about which came first. The evidence can be read either way. There's a theological question embedded in this case that rarely gets discussed directly. If God exists, if there's meaning to existence, how does something like this happen? How does a child die violently in her own home on the night celebrating the birth of Christ? Patsy Ramsey, deeply religious, must have wrestled with this. How do you maintain faith when your prayers for your daughter's safety went so catastrophically unanswered? Different people answer this differently. Some lose faith entirely. Some find deeper faith through tragedy. Some decide that God gives free will, even to those who use it for evil. Some believe everything happens for a reason we can't understand. But for a mother holding her dead daughter, for a father who couldn't protect his child, these philosophical comforts must feel hollow. The investigators who worked this case were changed by it. Some left law enforcement. Some became obsessed, working it long after official involvement ended. Some wrote books, gave lectures, became experts on a case that has no solution. They carried JonBenét with them, a ghost they couldn't lay to rest, a failure that defines their careers no matter what else they accomplished. Detective Lou Smith came out of retirement to work the case. He was dying of cancer, but spent his final years pursuing the intruder theory with religious devotion. He created elaborate presentations, documented every possible entry point, every unexplained fiber and hair. He prayed with the Ramseys, believed in their innocence with a faith that went beyond evidence. When he died, he left behind boxes of research, videos of his theories, a legacy of doubt about the official suspicion of the family. Steve Thomas, another detective, reached the opposite conclusion. He believed Patsy killed JonBenét in a rage over bedwetting. He wrote a book laying out his theory, faced lawsuits, left the police force bitter and disillusioned. He couldn't understand how wealthy parents could lawyer up instead of cooperating fully. He saw obstruction where others saw self-protection. He saw guilt where others saw grief. Two good detectives, looking at the same evidence, reaching completely different conclusions. This is the maddening heart of the case. It's not that there's no evidence, it's that the evidence supports multiple narratives. It's a crime scene that's also a mirror, reflecting back what we bring to it. The bedwetting theory deserves examination. JonBenét had been having accidents, which is normal for a 6-year-old, but frustrating for parents. There were reports of feces found in her bed, on candy in her room. Some saw this as evidence of psychological distress, possibly from abuse. Others saw it as normal childhood regression, especially during the excitement and disruption of the holidays. If Patsy, exhausted from cancer treatment and holiday preparations, had snapped over wet sheets on a night when they had to fly early the next morning, it would explain the head blow, a moment of rage immediately regretted. But it doesn't explain the elaborate staging, the garrote, the ransom note, unless Patsy was capable of extraordinary deception under extraordinary pressure. Those who knew Patsy described her as dramatic, perfectionist, image-conscious, the kind of person who threw elaborate parties, who dressed her daughter like a doll, who needed everything to appear perfect. But also as a devoted mother who adored JonBenét, who was living every day conscious that cancer could return and steal her time with her children. Could such a woman kill her daughter? Could she then stage a kidnapping? Could she maintain that lie for the rest of her life, even as cancer returned, even as she faced her own death? It requires believing in a level of compartmentalization that borders on the sociopathic. John Ramsey presents a different puzzle. Successful businessman calm under pressure, used to controlling situations and narratives. He hired lawyers and publicists immediately, managed the family's response like a CEO managing a crisis. Some saw this as suspicious. Others saw it as an intelligent man protecting his family from a feeding frenzy. His behavior that morning was strange. The way he disappeared for long periods. The way he went straight to the wine cellar when finally asked to search, as if he knew what he'd find. The way Detective Arndt described his eyes when he brought JonBenét up. Something that frightened her at a primal level. But grief looks different on everyone. Shock manifests in various ways. A man who'd already lost one daughter might shut down emotionally as a survival mechanism. His controlled exterior might have been the only thing keeping him from complete collapse. We expect parents of murdered children to act certain ways, but there's no script for that kind of horror. The DNA evidence has been the most frustrating aspect of the case. Unknown male DNA was found on JonBenét's underwear and leggings. In 2008, this was used to officially clear the family, but subsequent analysis suggested it could be composite DNA from multiple sources, possibly from manufacturing or handling. It's trace DNA, the kind we leave everywhere and pick up from everything. Think about your own clothing. How many people touched it before you bought it? Who packaged it, shipped it, stocked it on shelves? Their DNA might be on it. Now add investigators, family members, anyone who touched JonBenét or her clothes after her death. The DNA evidence becomes a maze of possibilities, none definitive. There's also the problem of degradation. DNA breaks down over time, especially in less than ideal storage conditions. What we can test now might not represent what was there originally. We might be seeing partial profiles, contamination, artifacts of the testing process itself. Science has limits, especially when applied to compromised evidence. The pineapple evidence remains one of the case's most enigmatic clues. A bowl of pineapple with milk was on the kitchen table, with Burke's and Patsy's fingerprints on it. JonBenét had pineapple in her stomach that was barely digested, suggesting she ate it shortly before her death. But the parents insisted she didn't eat pineapple at the White's party or after coming home. So when did she eat it? Did she get up in the night, find the bowl, take some? Did someone give it to her? Was Burke up with her, sharing a late-night snack? The pineapple becomes crucial for establishing timeline and truth. If the parents are lying about the pineapple, what else are they lying about? If they're telling the truth, who fed JonBenét that pineapple? Burke's fingerprints on the bowl could mean everything or nothing. He lived in the house, could have touched that bowl at any time. But combined with the pineapple in JonBenét's stomach, it suggests a narrative. Brother and sister, up after parents went to bed sharing a snack. Then something went wrong. An argument over toys, over the pineapple itself, over any of the things siblings fight about. This is where the Burke theory gains traction. A 9-year-old boy possibly jealous of his sister's attention, possibly dealing with his own issues. A moment of anger, a flashlight used as a weapon. Parents finding their daughter unconscious or dead, making an impossible choice to protect their surviving child. It would explain so much. The ransom note written by parents trying to deflect attention, the garrote as staging to make it look like an intruder, the lawyers hired immediately to protect Burke, the strange dynamics in the house that morning. But it requires believing parents would choose to protect their son over seeking help for their daughter, would strangle her to stage a crime scene, would maintain this lie forever. Burke's interviews as a child were unsettling. He seemed detached, uninterested, more concerned with his Nintendo than his sister's death. When asked to draw his family, he didn't include JonBenét. When shown a bowl of pineapple in a photo, he seemed reluctant to identify it. Children process trauma differently than adults, but his affect was notably flat. His 2016 interview as an adult was even stranger. His inappropriate smiling, his demonstration of how someone might have hit JonBenét, his continued insistence he heard nothing that night despite being awake by his own admission. Either he's deeply traumatized, on the autism spectrum, or knows more than he's saying. Maybe all three. The grand jury's sealed indictments become more interesting in light of the Burke theory. They didn't indict for murder, but for child endangerment and being accessories after the fact. This suggests they believe the parents didn't kill JonBenét, but helped cover up for whoever did. If not an intruder, if not each other, who else could it be but Burke? Colorado law at the time wouldn't have allowed prosecution of a 9-year-old for murder. If Burke was responsible, he couldn't be charged. The parents could be charged for covering it up, but prosecutors might have decided that was pointless, charging grieving parents for protecting their surviving child after losing another. This could explain the district attorney's refusal to sign the indictments. Not because he thought the parents were innocent, but because he knew the real story could never be prosecuted. Better to let it remain unsolved than to reveal a truth that would destroy a child who couldn't be held legally responsible. But this is all speculation, built on speculation. We don't know what the grand jury saw. We don't know why the district attorney refused to prosecute. We don't know what Burke knows or doesn't know. We build elaborate theories on foundations of uncertainty. The Boulder police have been criticized extensively for their handling of the case. They failed to secure the scene, separate witnesses, prevent contamination. They let John find the body, let him carry her upstairs, let him destroy crucial evidence. They were a small department unused to murders, overwhelmed by the media attention, outmaneuvered by the Ramsey's legal team. But put yourself in their position. It's the day after Christmas. A child is reportedly kidnapped. The parents are wealthy, connected, distraught. You expect the kidnappers to call with demands. You don't immediately treat the parents as suspects because what parents would kill their child and stage such an elaborate cover-up? By the time you realize this isn't a normal kidnapping, it's too late. The scene is compromised, the evidence contaminated, the narrative already being shaped by expensive lawyers and publicists. The media coverage was intense and often sensationalized. JonBenét's pageant photos were everywhere, on magazine covers, television specials, nascent internet forums. She became a symbol of lost innocence, of beauty destroyed, of every parent's worst nightmare. But the coverage also turned her into something else, a commodity, a mystery to be consumed, a story that sold papers and drove ratings. The ethics of this coverage remain questionable. Should children who are murder victims become public property? Should their images be broadcast endlessly? Should their families be dissected and suspected in the court of public opinion? The media would say they're serving the public interest, helping solve the crime. Critics would say they're exploiting tragedy for profit. The pageant videos became particularly controversial. Watching a 6-year-old perform Cowboy's Sweetheart while knowing she'd soon be dead feels voyeuristic, intrusive, wrong. But we can't look away. There's something hypnotic about watching someone who doesn't know their fate, especially when we do. It's the ultimate dramatic irony. The videos also raised questions about the pageant world itself. Were these events harmless fun or something darker? Did they attract predators? Did they sexualize children? Did they create the conditions for JonBenét's murder? The pageant community defended itself, pointing out that thousands of girls participate without incident. But the association between child beauty pageants and JonBenét's death became permanent in public consciousness. Patsy's involvement in the pageant world was intense. She was living through JonBenét, some said, trying to recapture her own glory days as Miss West Virginia. She designed elaborate costumes, hired coaches, traveled extensively for competitions. Some saw a devoted mother supporting her daughter's interests. Others saw a woman pushing her child to fulfill her own unmet needs. JonBenét seemed to enjoy performing, by most accounts. She had natural stage presence, understood instinctively how to work a crowd. But was this genuine enjoyment or learned behavior? Did she love the pageants or love pleasing her mother? At 6, could she really tell the difference? These questions matter because they speak to motive. If the pageant world attracted a predator, that's one story. If the pressure of pageants created family tension that exploded into violence, that's another. If the pageants were irrelevant and coincidental to whatever happened that night, that's yet another. But we can't untangle these threads. They're woven too tightly into the fabric of the case. The house itself has become a character in this story, and its layout is crucial to understanding what might have happened. It was a maze of rooms and levels, additions and renovations, creating an almost labyrinthine floor plan. Someone unfamiliar with the house would have difficulty navigating it in the dark. This supports the theory that the killer was familiar with the home. The wine cellar where JonBenét's body was found was particularly obscure. It was in the basement, behind a latched door, in an area most visitors would never see. Fleet White, who had been to the house before, couldn't find it when he searched that morning. He looked right at the door, but didn't realize it led to a room. John Ramsey knew exactly where to go. This could mean John knew where JonBenét's body was all along, or it could mean he was systematically checking every space in his house, and the wine cellar was simply next on his mental list. The interpretation depends entirely on what you already believe about his guilt or innocence. The broken window in the basement has never been fully explained. John said he broke it the previous summer when locked out. But his stories about whether it was fixed, when it was fixed, who knew about it, kept changing. The housekeeper said she didn't know about any broken window. Others said they did. The window became a microcosm of the larger case. Everyone had a different version of the truth. If an intruder entered through that window, they would have had to squeeze through a small opening, drop into the basement without making noise, and then navigate the dark house to JonBenét's room. Possible, but difficult. They would also have to exit the same way, potentially carrying a struggling child, though the theory suggests JonBenét was killed in the basement, not taken alive. The suitcase beneath the window could have been used as a step, but it could also have been placed there for storage, its position coincidental. The disturbed spider web could indicate recent passage, or spiders could have spun a new web after the supposed intrusion. Every piece of evidence cuts both ways. The alarm system is another puzzle piece. The Ramseys had one, but rarely used it. That night, it wasn't set. An intruder would have to know this, or be incredibly lucky. The family's failure to set the alarm could be seen as the kind of tragic oversight that enables random crimes. Or it could be seen as evidence that there was no intruder to keep out because the threat was already inside. Throughout the investigation, there were reports of other incidents that might or might not be related. A series of burglaries in the neighborhood, a suspicious man approaching children, reports of someone watching the house. These could be connected to JonBenét's murder, or they could be the kind of ordinary crimes and creepy incidents that happen everywhere but take on new significance when a child is murdered. One of the most haunting aspects of the case is how normal December 25th was for the Ramseys. They opened presents, took photos, went to a party. JonBenét rode her new bike in the driveway. Burke played with his Nintendo. It was an ordinary Christmas for a wealthy family. There's video from that morning, the last images of JonBenét alive, and nothing in them suggests the horror to come. This is perhaps what disturbs us most about the case. Not just that a child was murdered, but that it happened without warning, without signs, without any of the foreshadowing we expect from stories. Real tragedy doesn't announce itself. It arrives suddenly, transforming ordinary moments into last moments, normal days into the last day. The ransom note's demand for $118,000 remains one of its most puzzling aspects. Not just the amount, John's bonus, but the specificity. Kidnappers might demand $100,000 or $150,000 or $1 million, but $118,000? It's such a particular number, suggesting inside knowledge but also something else. A personal significance, a message. Some have suggested the amount was chosen to throw suspicion on someone with access to John's financial information, a disgruntled employee, a business rival. Others see it as evidence the note was written by someone in the family, someone who grabbed a number from recent memory without thinking how incriminating it would be. Still others wonder if the number had symbolic meaning we don't understand. The note's language about foreign faction has spawned countless theories. Was it meant to suggest terrorists, corporate espionage, or was it just someone who had watched too many action movies trying to sound mysterious? The phrase is so odd, so specific yet vague, that it almost seems like a joke. But if it was a joke, it was the darkest kind. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. This line has been analyzed endlessly. It suggests political motivation, anti-American sentiment, but it's such an awkward construction, like someone trying to sound ideological without any actual ideology. It reads like bad screenplay dialogue, which might be exactly what it is, someone mimicking what they think kidnappers sound like. The note's movie references are particularly telling. Whole phrases lifted from films like Ransom and Dirty Harry. This suggests someone who consumed a lot of American popular culture, not a foreign faction at all. It's someone whose understanding of crime comes from Hollywood, not experience. This could point to a young person, an amateur, someone playing out a fantasy. But it could also be deliberate misdirection. Someone smart enough to make the note sound amateurish on purpose. Someone creating a false persona through movie quotes and bad grammar. The note is either very clever or very stupid, and we can't tell which. Don't try to grow a brain, John. This phrase has become infamous for its strangeness. It's insulting but also almost affectionate, like something you'd say to someone you know well. It suggests familiarity with John, maybe even fondness. This isn't how professional kidnappers talk. This is personal. The note writer's decision to address John, not Patsy, is interesting. Traditional, assuming the father has the money, the power, or someone who knew John specifically, or someone trying to exclude Patsy for psychological reasons. Every choice in the note could be significant or arbitrary, and we have no way to distinguish between them. The length of the note itself is perhaps its most damning feature. 3 pages is extraordinary for a ransom note. Most are brief, to the point, written in advance. This note meanders, repeats itself, seems almost stream of consciousness in places. It's someone working out their thoughts as they write, not delivering a prepared message. If an intruder wrote it in the house while the family slept, they spent perhaps 30 minutes or more at it. That's 30 minutes of incredible risk. Sitting in the house, writing by flashlight, or risking turning on a light. Every second increasing the chance of discovery. It's almost impossible to imagine someone taking that risk. Unless they felt safe. Unless they knew the family's routines, knew they slept heavily, knew the house well enough to find paper and pen in the dark. Or unless there was no risk because they lived in the house, could write the note at their leisure, had all the time in the world because they weren't going anywhere. The practice notes found on the same pad are crucial. Someone started to write Mr. and Mrs., then crossed it out, decided to address only John. This shows deliberation, editing, thinking about how the note should read. It's not a spontaneous act, but a considered one. Someone was crafting this message carefully, despite its apparent carelessness. Handwriting analysis has been inconclusive but suggestive. Most experts agree John didn't write it, but Patsy couldn't be eliminated. Some experts saw strong similarities in letter formation, spacing, style. Others said the differences were too significant. The writer appeared to be trying to disguise their handwriting, printing instead of using cursive, but certain habits leaked through. Patsy's handwriting samples before and after the murder show interesting changes. Her style seemed to shift, becoming less like the ransom note over time. Was this natural evolution, deliberate distancing, unconscious adjustment, or meaningless variation? Like everything in this case, it could be read multiple ways. The note was written with a Sharpie found in the house. The killer brought no tools, no weapons, nothing except perhaps themselves. Everything used in the crime, the paper, the pen, the paintbrush for the garrote, the cord, came from the house. This suggests either an unprepared intruder who improvised everything, or an inside job using materials at hand. Let's pause here and consider what this case has become in American culture. It's more than an unsolved murder. It's a mystery that touches our deepest fears and fascinations. The death of innocence, the possibility that parents could kill their children, the idea that wealth and privilege can buy justice, or at least its absence. JonBenét has become an icon of lost childhood, her pageant photos reproduced endlessly, her face recognized by millions who never knew her. She's frozen at 6 forever, never to grow up, never to disappoint or rebel or become ordinary. She remains perfect in her tragedy, beautiful in her absence. The case has spawned an industry of experts, consultants, and theorists. People have made careers from analyzing this murder. Books, documentaries, podcasts, TV specials. The case generates content continuously. Every anniversary brings new coverage, new theories, new experts claiming to have solved it. But amid all this noise, the signal remains faint. The truth, if there is a singular truth, stays hidden. We have all the evidence we're likely to ever have, absent a confession or revolutionary new technology. The case is functionally frozen, a mystery in amber, preserved but unsolvable. The Boulder Police Department maintains a small team that continues to work the case. They field tips, review evidence periodically, hope for breakthroughs that never come. It's become a kind of penance for the department, an acknowledgement of their early failures, a commitment to JonBenét that extends beyond hope of resolution. Volunteers and amateur detectives continue their own investigations. Online forums dissect every photo, analyze every interview, propose increasingly elaborate theories. Some of these people have spent decades thinking about this case, no more details than some official investigators. They've made JonBenét's death their life's work, for reasons they probably can't fully articulate. Is this healthy? Is this helpful? Or is it a kind of cultural obsession that prevents the case from resting? Are we keeping JonBenét from peace by our refusal to let her go? Or are we honoring her by refusing to forget, refusing to accept that her killer might never face justice? Jon Ramsey, now in his 80s, still gives occasional interviews. He's remarried, has tried to build a new life, but the case follows him everywhere. He speaks of forgiveness, of moving forward, but also of wanting answers before he dies. He's outlived 2 wives, 2 daughters. He carries griefs most of us can't imagine. When he talks about JonBenét now, there's a distance in his voice. Not coldness exactly, but the kind of emotional buffer that develops after decades of pain. He can discuss the case analytically, even participate in documentaries examining evidence. It's as if he's split himself in 2, the father who grieves and the man who must function. Burke rarely speaks publicly, and when he does, it only raises more questions. His effect is so unusual, his responses so unexpected, that even those inclined to believe in his innocence find him unsettling. Is this simply who he is, an awkward, possibly neurodivergent man shaped by unimaginable childhood trauma? Or is there something more, something hidden behind that inappropriate smile? The photographers who documented the crime scene carry their own burdens. They captured images no one should have to take: a child's body, a family's destruction, a house transformed into evidence. Some have spoken about how the case haunted them, how they can still see JonBenét when they close their eyes. The first responders who arrived that morning have their own trauma. They walked into what they thought was a kidnapping and discovered a murder. They made mistakes that would be analyzed and criticized for decades. They live with the weight of what they did and didn't do, the permanent question of whether different choices might have led to justice. Even the peripheral figures in the case were marked by it. The housekeeper who found herself under suspicion, The Santa Claus who became a suspect because he'd visited the house. The neighbors who were questioned repeatedly. The friends who tried to comfort the family that morning. All of them touched by tragedy, changed by proximity to horror. This is the ripple effect of unsolved murder. It doesn't just destroy the immediate family. It spreads outward like infection, touching everyone who comes near it. Lives are derailed, relationships destroyed, faith shattered. The murder of one 6-year-old girl in Boulder became a trauma that affected thousands. And what of Boulder itself? The city wanted to move past this case, to return to being known for its university, its mountains, its liberal politics. But JonBenét's ghost lingers. Tour groups still stop at the house, true crime tourists still visit. The city will forever be where JonBenét Ramsey died, no matter what else happens there. As I tell you this story in the quiet of night, as your breathing perhaps grows deeper and more regular, I wonder what JonBenét would think of all this. The industry built on her death, the millions of words written about her last hours, the strangers who feel they know her from photos and videos. Would she be sad that her death overshadowed her life? Would she be angry at whoever killed her? Would she forgive? At 6, she probably didn't fully understand concepts like death and murder. She knew about performing, about being pretty, about making people smile. She didn't know about wine cellars and garrotes and ransom notes. There's a photo of JonBenét taken just days before she died. She's smiling, but it's not her pageant smile. It's genuine, spontaneous, the kind of smile children give when they're truly happy. She's looking at something off camera, maybe a pet, maybe a family member, maybe something silly on TV. She's just a kid being a kid. This is the photo I prefer to remember. Not the pageant shots with their elaborate costumes and adult makeup, not the crime scene photos that I hope you never see. Just JonBenét being 6 years old, in the days when that was enough, when that was everything. But we can't separate that child from her tragedy, can't unknown what we know. Every image of her is colored by her ending. Every video is watched through the lens of loss. She's forever the girl who died too young, too violently, too mysteriously. The investigation continues, technically. Advances in DNA technology offer hope that someday, somehow, there might be answers. Genetic genealogy has solved other cold cases, might solve this one, or perhaps someone will confess on their deathbed, or new evidence will surface from an unexpected source. But with each passing year, resolution becomes less likely. Witnesses die, memories fade, evidence degrades, the case becomes history rather than current event. JonBenét would be in her 30s now, might have children of her own. Instead, she's forever 6, forever in that basement, forever a mystery. The house still stands, families still live there, children still sleep in what was once JonBenét's room. They've been told the history or discovered it themselves. Some say they feel nothing, that it's just a house. Others admit to uneasiness, especially in the basement, especially near that little room. Can buildings absorb trauma? Can walls remember? Or do we project our knowledge onto spaces, creating hauntings from our own minds? The house on 15th Street, now 749, is just brick and wood and glass. But it's also a crime scene, a mystery, a tomb that briefly held a princess. Late at night in Boulder, when snow falls like it did that December, when Christmas lights twinkle from roof lines, you can almost imagine it all happening again. The family returning from the party, the children going to bed, the parents settling in for the night, everything normal until the moment it wasn't. Somewhere in those dark hours between bedtime and dawn, JonBenét Ramsey died. Whether by stranger or family, accident or intention, panic or plan, we may never know. The truth lies buried under decades of theories, suspicions, failed investigations. It's a secret kept by someone who might be dead, might be free, might be reading these very words. There are moments in the case that haunt me particularly. Patsy's scream when she found the note. John's cry when he found JonBenét. Burke alone in his room while chaos erupted below. The moment someone tied that garrote, tightened it, made the irreversible choice. The second JonBenét realized something was wrong, if she had time to realize anything at all. These moments happened. They're not speculation or theory. They're historical fact, even if we don't understand their context or connection. Someone knows exactly what happened in each of these moments. Someone could tell us the truth, but they haven't, and probably never will. So we're left with questions that multiply rather than resolve. Did Patsy write the ransom note? Did John know where JonBenét was before he found her? Did Burke hear or see something that night? Was there an intruder? Was it a kidnapping gone wrong? A murder staged as kidnapping? An accident staged as murder? Every question leads to more questions. Every answer opens new uncertainties. The case is like a mathematical equation with too many variables and not enough constants. You can make it balance different ways, but never perfectly, never completely. Perhaps that's the final truth about the JonBenét Ramsey case. Not that it's unsolved, but that it's unsolvable. Too much contamination, too many lies, too much time has passed. The truth, if it ever emerges, will come not from evidence but from conscience, from someone finally unable to carry the weight of what they know. Until then, JonBenét remains frozen in time, in photographs, in pageant videos, in our collective memory. The little girl who loved to perform, who got a bicycle for Christmas, who ate pineapple with milk, who died in her own home while her family slept. This is the story that never quite ends, the wound that never quite heals. As you drift towards sleep, perhaps you're thinking of your own children, your own home, your own assumptions about safety. Perhaps you're wondering what secrets hide in your neighbors' houses, what darkness can lurk behind perfect facades. Or perhaps you're just sad for a little girl you never knew, whose death became public property, whose tragedy became entertainment. Perhaps you're thinking about justice denied, truth obscured, the failure of all our systems to protect one small child, or at least explain her death. The case remains open. Tips still come in. Investigators still review evidence. Hope persists, however faint, that someday there will be answers, that JonBenét will have justice, that her family, whether guilty or innocent, will have resolution, that this story will finally have an ending. But tonight, in this quiet moment, there is no ending. Just questions echoing through decades. Just a house in Boulder where something terrible happened. Just a family destroyed by either crime or suspicion or both. Just a little girl who went to sleep on Christmas and never woke up. The snow still falls on Boulder. Christmas still comes each December. Children still receive bicycles and dolls and games. Families still gather for parties, take photos, make memories. Life continues its ancient rhythms. But in one house, on one street, those rhythms were broken. In one basement, behind one door, time stopped. A mystery was born that would outlive many of those who tried to solve it. A tragedy occurred that would echo through generations. JonBenét Ramsey died sometime in the dark hours between December 25th and 26th, 1996. She was 6 years old. She had blonde hair and blue eyes. She liked to sing and dance. She was somebody's daughter, somebody's sister, somebody's baby. She was found in the wine cellar of her home, wrapped in a white blanket, a garrote around her neck. There was a ransom note that made no sense. There were parents who acted strangely. There was evidence that pointed everywhere and nowhere. There were investigations that failed, theories that multiplied, suspicions that destroyed lives, media coverage that turned tragedy into spectacle. And through it all, at the center of it all, a little girl who deserved better than she got, in life and in death. This is where our story pauses, not ends. In the uncertainty, in the not knowing, in the space between question and answer where JonBenét remains forever. Neither at peace nor at rest, but suspended in our collective memory, waiting for a resolution that may never come. The house that never slept again stands testimony to the permanence of some mysteries. The family that was never whole again bears witness to the weight of unanswered questions. And JonBenét herself, forever 6, forever in that white shirt with the silver star, reminds us that sometimes terrible things happen and we never learn why. Close your eyes now. Let the story settle into the quiet spaces of near sleep. Think of JonBenét not as she was found, but as she lived, laughing, singing, riding her Christmas bicycle. Remember her as more than a mystery, more than evidence, more than a tragedy. Remember her as a child who deserved to grow up, to become whoever she was meant to be. Remember her as someone's little girl who should have woken up on December 26th to fly to Michigan, to play with Christmas toys, to live the life that was stolen from her. And remember, too, that somewhere, someone knows what happened. Someone holds the truth we've spent decades seeking. They walk among us carrying answers to questions that have haunted a nation. They sleep at night, somehow, with the weight of JonBenét's ghost. Maybe they've convinced themselves they're innocent. Maybe they've forgotten crucial details. Maybe they've rewritten the story so many times in their mind that even they don't know what's true anymore. Or maybe they remember everything, every moment, every choice, every second of that night. The truth exists, even if we can't access it. What happened to JonBenét is not a matter of opinion or theory, but historical fact. Someone was in that basement with her. Someone tied the garrote. Someone wrote the note. Someone knows. But knowledge and revelation are different things. The truth can be known without being shared, carried without being confessed. It can die with those who hold it, become ash and dust like the bodies that contained it. This may be JonBenét's fate, to remain forever a question without an answer. Or perhaps tomorrow, next week, next year, someone will finally speak. A deathbed confession, a moment of conscience, a piece of evidence that finally makes sense of the senseless. Perhaps resolution waits just beyond our sight, approaching slowly but inevitably. Until then, we have only what we've always had. Questions, theories, a house in Boulder, a family destroyed, a child who never grew up, a mystery that reflects our deepest fears about safety, family, the potential for evil in ordinary places. Thank you for spending this night with Murder Lullaby. If this story kept you company, subscribe, leave a like, and return whenever the night feels long. Until then, rest easy and let the dark be gentle.